This topic series will provide information related to lockdown drills. Episodes in the series will include information about what they are, research being conducted in Maryland related to the impact of these drills, students providing their perspective, and a national expert sharing information about the importance of communication. We hope you find this series helpful in understanding lockdown drills. All right. Well, thank you for joining us to share your knowledge and expertise with our listening audience today, Kate. If you could get started by introducing yourself and the role of the Maryland Center for School Safety with lockdown drills in Maryland.
Sure, happy to. Thank you for having me. So, I am Kate Bryan. I'm the executive director of the Maryland Center for School Safety. And so our office does quite a lot in the school safety realm, both for public and private schools. But since we're talking specifically about lockdown drills today, our office has some sort of unique responsibilities that are shared with the Department of Education. So in Maryland, public school systems, are required to conduct lockdown drills annually. So each year, each school within the state is required to conduct a lockdown drill. Those regulations are established by the State Board of Education. So where we sort of intersect with the department is our responsibility lies in the publication of guidelines on how those lockdown drills are to be conducted. So specifically, we are required by law since 2024, we are required to publish guidelines for school systems to assist them in their development and conduct of active assailant or lockdown drills in the state of Maryland.
Thank you. That's a good distinction to kind of understand how the two different departments sort of work together, but also sort of separately in those unique considerations. So, you actually mentioned you used the phrase active assailant drill and lockdown sort of somewhat interchangeably there. Can you explain for our listeners the difference between an active assailant drill and a lockdown drill?
Yeah, so we get that a lot. So I use active assailant because the statute, the law itself, describes active assailant when they're referring to these drills. We use the term lockdown in alignment with the Department of Education, which is the drill that is required by regulation. The difference between the two is really terminology. So when we refer to an active assailant drill, we're referring to a hazard. So think about when we talk about a fire drill, right? We're talking about the hazard of a fire and practicing actions that may be in response to that hazard. Same thing with active assailant. So when individuals refer to an active assailant drill, they're really referring to the hazard that is impacting the school that then the school has to drill their actions on. When we refer to lockdown drill, which is really what our office promotes, we want them to be called lockdown drills, and I can explain a little bit later why sort of the distinction where we want schools to refer to them as lockdown drills. But a lockdown drill refers to the action. So regardless of the hazard, or what caused the hazard, there is a situation occurring inside a school building where it becomes necessary for individuals within that facility to protect themselves in what we call a lockdown status. That means inside a hopefully room with a door that is locked, turning the lights off, remaining quiet, and remaining out of sight. So that's really the distinction between an active assailant drill and a lockdown drill, right? So the scenario or the hazard and the act and referring to the drill in those terms, or the actions in response to a particular hazard that is inside the school.
Thank you. That's really very helpful for people to understand that it's two different words, phrases, but meaning sort of the same thing sometimes in the way it's used. Maryland has some legal requirements related to how schools conduct lockdown drills. Can you share with the listening audience what those are?
The most prominent one, so the one that sort of prompted the legislation to be brought forth and enacted, are the activities that are no longer permitted during a lockdown drill in the state of Maryland. So those, and so I'll put a caveat here. So with the exception of drills and training that are sort of outside a regular school day, lockdown drills in the state of Maryland may not include any activities that could be traumatic for students and staff. And this includes things like simulated gunfire or explosions, individuals acting as intruders inside the building, individuals acting as victims of intruders inside the building. So really any activity that would potentially or that a reasonable person would determine could cause trauma to either students or staff in the building while practicing their lockdown drill. So that's sort of the high level, the most prominent and most important piece of the legislation. So there are some other legal requirements of lockdown drills in Maryland. So the second relates to notifications. School systems in the state of Maryland are required to notify parents at the start of every school year, basically an annual schedule of when these drills will be taking place. Most importantly, they need to at least note for parents what month the drills are going to take place in the school. So maybe not the exact day or the exact time, but at least the month that these will be occurring. The second piece of notifications is a requirement that staff and students are required to be notified in advance of a drill. So it's also incredibly important. And in a second, I'll talk a little bit about why those notifications are important. And then finally, following a drill, parents are then required to be notified once a drill is over that the drill was conducted. So the notifications are really a key piece in all of this. So the prohibited actions, the passage of the law were really intended to minimize trauma on students and staff. And one of the ways to do that is effective communication or these notifications. So as a parent, if I know that my child has some past trauma or some concerns that may come up in practicing lockdown drills, I may choose to not have my child participate in that lockdown drill. So it may be really important for me to know when they're going to take place so that I can work with the school administration to find a way for my child to not participate. The same goes for students and staff. So when they're notified ahead of time, they have the ability to either self-report or at least be aware that these drills are going to be taking place so that they have potentially a time and an opportunity to opt out. So again, prohibited actions, notifications. The third major requirement in the law is the support that school systems are required to provide students and staff in preparation for and following these drills. So there are some requirements for school systems to identify students and staff who may require additional support, again, either before or during or after a drill. And then a requirement for school systems to provide mental health follow-up for students and staff that may have experienced some negative effects or negative impacts of a lockdown drill. And the final legal requirement is tied to data collection. So our office, in partnership with the National Center for School Mental Health, is collecting data from students, parents, and staff following each lockdown drill in the state. So the goal here is to determine, for us to be able to really look at data that helps us determine the effectiveness and the potential psychological impact to, again, students, staff, parents, and the entire school community. So those are the big legislative requirements.
That's great. They're all really important actions that honestly help to assure that all students have the same trauma free experience in Maryland schools. So, thank you for sort of outlining those and the work you've done to make that happen. Next question is really looking at MCSS has published guidelines for schools that include a number of best practices. Can you speak to some of the practices that are in those guidelines?
Sure. So the guidelines as we have them structured, so we have two sort of pretty big sections. So sort of the regular background on how this whole thing got started. But our guidelines focus first on what's prohibited. So the activities and the actions that are prohibited by schools during a lockdown drill. Then we talk about the importance of multidisciplinary planning teams. So we talk about within that section, we talk about representation on the team, right? Ensuring that team is diverse, not just within the school, but even expanding to the school community, but that it has representation from really that the representation on the planning team for the folks who will determine how these drills are conducted in the school system is a representation of the school community, right? So if you have English language learners in your school, you will want to make sure that there's a representative on the planning team who understands the challenges within that community. Same with, whether it's religious backgrounds and or considerations, whether it's individuals with disabilities. But again, just a really cross-section of the school community. So not just the representation of the school community, but the expertise that they bring in. So do they bring in nursing, special education, facility management, food services, really all of the different sort of components and areas of expertise that could be helpful as schools determine again how best to conduct these lockdown drills. We talk about the need for community involvement, and we give some suggestions on the size of the team. So that's really the piece on multidisciplinary planning teams. Then we sort of break down from a drill notification. So if you think about sort of pre-drill work, we have a section that goes through how drill notifications are to be done, both at the start of the school year as well as prior to the drill being conducted. Then we talk about the preparation for the training and drill, right? So the areas for the school to consider as they're putting together their planning, really all of the elements that could be helpful in them as they prepare to conduct either lockdown training or drills. We break into sort of the conduct of the drill, right? What are the key considerations when individuals think about the actual day of the drill, right? From the moment the announcement is made all the way through, all of the actions to when the drill is called to closure. So those are some of the key areas that are within the best practices. And then we have a specialized section that really breaks into specialized populations. So there are considerations that need to be made depending on some of the individuals within the school community. So for example, we have a section within the guidelines that talks about how to provide support to individuals with disabilities, either before, during, or after a drill. We provide some recommendations for supporting English language learners. We provide some recommendations for individuals depending on their age and grade level, right? Our recommendations for an elementary school lockdown drill are going to be a lot different than a high school lockdown drill. We have a little bit about taking into consideration individual backgrounds and experiences. So individuals who have varying cultural beliefs or practices, those can really impact how lockdown drills are perceived. So it's really important that educators involve individuals of that community in their multidisciplinary team, so that they're conducting these exercises in a manner that is inclusive. And then a new for this year, we added key considerations for students and staff who are new to the school. We recognized following our publication of guidelines last year that we we missed a key element, that students and staff don't always remain in the same school throughout their entire school career. So we've provided some considerations for those students who are rising from elementary to middle, for example, or for a teacher who is transferred, or a student who transfers from another district or another state. So the importance of that is, imagine you are a student in another state and you practice procedures a very particular way for lockdowns or active assailant scenarios, and you come to Maryland and Maryland does it differently, or your school system does it differently, or your elementary school does it different from your middle school. So we've provided some guidelines for school systems to be able to assist those individuals who are new to the school to be able to understand the requirements, not just the requirements, but what they're going to experience in a drill in that school, in that district.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to read through the document, and it is very thorough, reads very easily. I recommend that folks take some time to look through it, not just once, but maybe have it available as a resource for themselves during the year, particularly those multidisciplinary planning teams that you're talking about. So I'm gonna also prompt you a little bit to, so we've talked about the drill, right? The lockdown drill. But just to help our audience members understand, again, what would be the type of scenario or conditions in which an actual lockdown may occur in a school?
If the school were to receive a threat that there is an individual inside the building attempting to do harm, whether or not they've confirmed that individual is inside the building or not, the school administrator may choose to place the school in lockdown out of an abundance of caution. And while they and their law enforcement partners are conducting assessments, reviewing video footage, and trying to determine whether or not there actually is a threat inside the school. And then the third is when there is a confirmed individual inside the school intending to do harm. And so those would be three triggers for a lockdown.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think it's helpful for people to sort of understand that. I think we're aware that the procedure of lockdown sometimes is used for a much larger array of events. So trying to really zone in and work on that somewhat. So before we close out, want to again thank you for taking time to join us today and sharing all this great information. Anything else that you think is important for our listening audience to be aware of as it relates to lockdown drills?
Yes. So I don't want our listening community or your listening community to assume that the law, the guidelines, any regulations that get published, the study that's being done, the data that will be collected is intended to limit and or stop lockdown drills. The practicing of emergency procedures is incredibly important, and one of the key pillars and key layers to a comprehensive school safety program. When lockdown drills are conducted in a manner that is trauma informed, that follows our guidelines, that takes into consideration their school community. They can be incredibly effective at preparing students and staff for any kind of disaster, any kind of emergency, any kind of hazard or risk that could impact the school. And so I think most important is we continue conducting drills of all types, including lockdown drills, but that we do them in a way, in a manner that really where we stop and think about the actions that we're doing, the way we're conducting training, and the way that we're conducting these drills, and thinking about the individuals involved, potentially any past trauma that they've had, what backgrounds they have, what other considerations we may have. So I don't ever want anyone to believe that there is an attempt, particularly by our office, to stop conducting drills, because we truly believe that the layer of school safety that ties to emergency preparedness efforts, conducting assessments, developing an emergency plan, and conducting drills and evaluating, is a key layer within the comprehensive school safety program.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I know that this conversation will really kind of kicks off this topic series, and we'll be hearing more from the National Center for School-Based Mental Health that's actually helping to conduct the survey, and looking at that research study, as well as some students. So we have planned to hear directly from some students related to this topic as well. So we thank you for sort of laying a great groundwork for that series.
Absolutely.